There's a unique cruelty to the fluorescent lights in a hospital room at 2 a.m. They hum with a cold, indifferent energy, turning the world into a sterile landscape of white sheets and beige walls. For the past week, since the surgery on my heart, this room had been my world. A world measured in the slow, steady drip of an IV, the rhythmic beep of monitors, and the forced, cheerful smiles of overworked nurses. At 70 years old, I had never felt so fragile, so utterly dependent. And it is in the soil of vulnerability, I've learned, that the most poisonous weeds of greed are given room to grow. My name is Eleanor Vance. For 45 years, I was the wife of a brilliant, kind man named Michael. We built a life, a family, and a home together. The home, it was more than just wood and nails. It was a living thing, a silent keeper of our history. The pencil marks on the doorframe charting our daughter Jessica's growth, the worn spot on the floor where Michael and I used to dance in the kitchen, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco that still clung to the curtains in his study. After he passed, the house was my fortress, my connection to him, the one place on earth I still felt safe. If you are listening to this, please consider subscribing. This is not a story about sickness. It's a story about a betrayal so profound it almost stopped my newly repaired heart. It's about a daughter who saw her mother's weakness not as a reason to care, but as an opportunity to strike. And it's about a trap, carefully laid, baited with my own fragility. My daughter, Jessica, was a frequent visitor during that first week. She would arrive with a bright, concerned smile and a bouquet of flowers that were always just a little too extravagant. She played the part of the devoted daughter beautifully. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" she'd ask, her voice a perfect symphony of gentle concern. She would fluff my pillows, pour me a glass of water, and hold my hand. But her eyes were always somewhere else. They were scanning the room, calculating, assessing. She was a hawk circling a wounded animal, waiting for the perfect moment. The conversation always, eventually, drifted to the house. "I was over at the house yesterday, paying some bills for you," she'd say, her tone light and casual. "The roof is looking a little worn, Mom. The inspector said it might need a full replacement soon. That's going to be expensive." A few days later, it was the plumbing. The plumber found some old, galvanized pipes. He said it's a ticking time bomb. A full repiping could cost a fortune. Every visit brought a new, looming financial disaster. The furnace, the foundation, the ancient wiring. She would sigh, a performance of profound worry. "I just don't know how you'll manage all this on your own, Mom, especially now. The upkeep is it's a tremendous burden for one person." I would just lie there, my body weak from the surgery, and listen. I knew what she was doing. She was building a case for the disposal of my life's anchor. She saw my home not as a sanctuary of memories, but as a frozen asset, a pile of capital that was inconveniently tied up in my continued existence. Beside my hospital bed, on the small metal rolling table, sat my only personal possession, a small silver-framed photograph of the house, taken on the day Michael and I first bought it. We were young, impossibly young, standing on the porch, our arms around each other, beaming with the proud, terrified joy of new homeowners. I kept it there as a reminder of what I was fighting to get back to. It was my North Star. One afternoon, Jessica noticed me looking at it. "You love that old house so much, don't you?" she said, her voice soft. "It's my home, dear," I whispered. She picked up the frame, her manicured fingers tracing the outline of the roof. "It's just a lot of responsibility, Mom. Wouldn't it be nice to simplify? To have everything taken care of? No more worrying about plumbers or roofers, just peace and quiet." It was the sales pitch of a predator, delivered with the gentle coo of a dove. She was selling me on the idea of my own institutionalization, packaging a nursing home as a luxury resort. The final act of her performance came at the end of the second week. I was still weak, still disoriented from the medication. She arrived not with flowers, but with a thick sheaf of papers and a determined look in her eye. "Good news, Mom," she announced cheerfully. "I've been on the phone with your insurance company all morning. It's a bureaucratic nightmare, as usual, but I think I've figured out how to get them to cover the full cost of your extended stay rehabilitation." She spread the papers out on my bedside table. They were covered in dense, incomprehensible legal jargon, endless paragraphs of fine print. "I just need your signature on a few of these forms," she said, her voice breezy and efficient. "It's just standard authorization stuff. It gives me the ability to handle the billing, to fight with them on your behalf. You shouldn't have to worry about this right now." She handed me a pen. My hand was trembling. The medication made my vision blurry, the words on the page swimming before my eyes. I saw fields for signatures, for dates, for initials. It all looked official. It all looked helpful. "Are you sure about this, Jessica?" I asked, my voice weak. "Of course, Mom. I'm just trying to take care of you. You're in no condition to deal with this headache yourself. Just sign here, and I'll handle everything. I promise." I looked at my daughter, at her bright, smiling, earnest face. The face of the little girl I had raised, the girl whose height I had charted on the doorframe of the house she was now trying to steal. A part of my heart, the foolish, eternally hopeful mother's heart, wanted to believe her. But the other part, the part that had learned to survive, the part that had listened to my husband negotiate deals for 45 years, saw the lie in her eyes. But I was so tired, so weak, and my weakness, I knew, was her strength. So I took the pen, and with a hand that shook with a fatigue that was both physical and spiritual, I signed where she pointed. One signature, then another, then a third. As she gathered the papers, her movements were a little too quick, a little too triumphant. She tucked them into her expensive handbag with a definitive snap. "There," she said, her smile brighter than ever. "All taken care of. Now you just focus on getting better." She kissed my forehead and left, leaving the scent of her perfume hanging in the sterile air. I lay back against the pillows, the beeping of the heart monitor, a steady, lonely rhythm in the quiet room. I knew I had not just signed some insurance forms. I knew I had just signed away my life. But as I looked at the picture of my home, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the deepest, most fortified part of my soul. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over. She had no idea that I had just let her make the first move in a war she could not possibly win. Recovery is a slow, arduous journey. It's a series of small, hard-won victories. The first time you can sit up in bed without the room spinning, the first steps you take down a long, echoing hallway, the first real meal that doesn't taste like cardboard. For 3 weeks, I focused all my energy on these small triumphs, fueled by a single, burning purpose: to get back home. My home was not just a place of comfort, it was my battlefield, and I needed to be on it to fight. During those weeks, Jessica's visits became less frequent. Her phone calls were brief and efficient. She was, she explained, incredibly busy, handling the mountain of paperwork related to my care and the endless repairs at the house. "The plumber found a massive leak, Mom," she'd say, her voice a performance of exasperated martyrdom. "The whole downstairs bathroom floor is ruined. It's a complete gut job. Don't worry, I'm managing it, but it's a fortune." Each call was another fabricated catastrophe, another nail in the coffin of my home's financial viability. She was building her narrative, brick by painful brick, creating a fictional reality where selling the house was not an act of greed, but a regrettable, practical necessity. I just listened, playing the part of the frail, overwhelmed patient. "Oh dear," I'd murmur. "You do whatever you think is best, Jessica. I trust you." The words felt like ash in my mouth, but I knew they were necessary. I was lulling the predator into a state of absolute, unshakable confidence. The day of my discharge finally arrived. I felt a surge of strength I hadn't felt in months. The doctors were pleased with my progress. "You're a fighter, Eleanor," my cardiologist said, signing the release forms. He had no idea how true that was. I had expected Jessica to pick me up, but at the last minute, she called. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice rushed. "I'm stuck in a nightmare meeting. I've called a car service for you. They'll take you straight home. I'll meet you there in a little while." It was the final, cowardly act. She couldn't even face me for the final betrayal. She was sending a stranger to deliver me to my own execution. The ride home was surreal. The city I had known my whole life looked different, alien. The world had kept spinning while mine had been confined to a single, sterile room. As the car turned onto Elmwood Drive, my heart began to pound with a mix of excitement and dread. And then, I saw it. It was a small, rectangular sign, hammered into the perfectly manicured lawn where Michael had taught our daughter to ride her bike. The sign was a garish, blood-red color, and the words on it were printed in stark, bold white letters. Sold. I stared at it, the single word a physical blow. I had known it was coming. I had prepared for it. But seeing it, seeing the violation in such stark, commercial terms, was still a shock. My fortress, my sanctuary, reduced to a real estate transaction. The car pulled into the driveway. I got out, my legs a little unsteady, and walked up the familiar stone path. I reached for the front door, my hand closing around the cool brass of the doorknob. And then I stopped. I didn't have my keys. Jessica had taken them from my bedside table in the hospital for safekeeping. I was a stranger at my own front door. I rang the bell. After a long moment, the door opened. It was Jessica. She was not dressed in her usual power suit or designer casual wear. She was wearing old jeans and a sweatshirt, and there were packing boxes stacked in the hallway behind her. She did not look happy to see me. Her expression was one of annoyed impatience, as if I had arrived at an inconvenient time. "Mom," she said, her voice flat. "You're early. The car service was supposed to take another hour." "I asked the driver to take the scenic route," I said, my voice quiet. "I wanted to see the cherry blossoms in the park." My eyes moved past her, to the boxes, to the familiar paintings that were no longer on the walls. "It seems you've been busy." Jessica finally dropped the pretense. Her face hardened, her expression becoming cold and resolute. This was no longer a game of subtle manipulation. This was the end game. "I told you the house was a money pit, Mom," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "The repairs were endless. It was either sell it or let it drain every last penny of your savings, and then what would be left for your long-term care?" "My long-term care," I repeated, the euphemism tasting like poison. "Yes," she said, stepping aside to reveal more of the dismantled hallway. "I found a wonderful place for you, Silver Maples. It's a top-of-the-line assisted living community. It has a garden. You'll love it. I've already put down the deposit using the proceeds from the sale." She was so proud of herself, so efficient, so practical. She had solved the problem of her aging mother with a clean, profitable transaction. "So that's it?" I asked, a genuine tremor in my voice now. "I'm just homeless?" "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her patience gone. "You're not homeless. You're being relocated to a more appropriate facility for your needs. The new owners are taking possession this afternoon. You're going to a nursing home now." The words, so blunt, so final, hung in the air between us. She had done it. She had stolen my home, my past, my future, and she was now evicting me from my own life with the cold efficiency of a landlord evicting a deadbeat tenant. I could see the finality in her eyes, the utter lack of remorse. She truly believed she had done the right thing, the smart thing. She believed she had won. I looked at her, my own daughter, a stranger who wore her face. I saw the greed, the callousness, the profound and chilling absence of love. The grief was so immense, it was a physical weight, threatening to crush me right there on the welcome mat Michael and I had picked out together. But then, I thought of my plan. I thought of Mr. Peterson. I thought of the final brilliant move my husband had taught me. Never let them see your true strength until the very last moment. I let a single, perfect tear roll down my cheek. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. I gave her the performance she so desperately expected. I don't understand," I whispered, my voice choked with feigned despair. "Where am I supposed to go?" A flicker of something pity, or perhaps just relief that the fight was over, crossed her face. "It's all taken care of, Mom," she said, her voice softening now that she had won. "I'll take you over to Silver Maples myself later. For now, you can wait in the car. I just have to finish up with the movers." She thought she was exiling me. She had no idea she was simply clearing the stage for the true owner's arrival. I allowed myself to be led, a seemingly broken old woman, to the curb. Jessica pointed to her sleek silver SUV. "Just wait in there, Mom. I'll turn the heat on for you. I'll only be an hour tops." She patted my shoulder with a final, condescending gesture of pity, and then turned, her focus already back on the logistics of her victory, the movers, the final paperwork, the profitable dismantling of my life. I did not get in the car. Instead, I remained on the sidewalk, a solitary, frail figure watching the final act of my own dispossession. I watched as two young men from a moving company carried out my favorite armchair, the one Michael had always sat in. I watched as they wheeled out the dining table where we had hosted 50 years of family Christmases. Each object leaving the house was a piece of my heart being carried away. Jessica directed them with brisk, impersonal efficiency, pointing and giving orders, a general commanding the sacking of a conquered city. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the black town car until it pulled up silently to the curb, right behind her SUV. It was an old, beautifully maintained Lincoln, the kind that spoke of old money and quiet power. The kind of car my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had always driven. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit emerged from the driver's side. It was Mr. Peterson. He was in his late 60s, a tall, serious man with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass and a loyalty to my late husband that was absolute. He did not look at me. Instead, he walked directly up the path to where Jessica was instructing the movers. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "I believe you are Jessica Vance?" Jessica turned, her expression one of pure annoyance at being interrupted. She looked Mr. Peterson up and down, taking in his expensive suit, and her demeanor shifted slightly. She could recognize power when she saw it. "I am," she said, her voice becoming more professional. "Can I help you?" "I am here on behalf of my client," Mr. Peterson said, "the new owner of this property. We are scheduled for the final walkthrough at this time." A wide, relieved smile broke across Jessica's face. This must be the buyer's lawyer. The final step. "Of course!" she exclaimed, her voice becoming warm and welcoming. "We were just finishing up. Please come in. I'm Jessica Vance, the seller. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." The sale was very quick. "Indeed it was," Mr. Peterson said, his face impassive. He stepped past her into the foyer, his eyes taking in the stacks of boxes and the chaotic scene of a life being dismantled. "My client is very eager to take possession." "I'm sure," Jessica said, practically preening. "It's a wonderful house, so much history. We were sad to let it go, of course, but my mother, she's reached an age where it was just too much for her to manage." She gestured vaguely in my direction, where I still stood on the sidewalk. "We found a lovely new facility for her. It's for the best." Mr. Peterson looked over at me for the first time. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a deep, cold anger on my behalf. He then turned back to Jessica. "Yes, about your mother," he said. "Before my client arrives, she has a few conditions regarding the handover." Jessica's smile tightened slightly. "Conditions? The sale is final. Everything was signed." "Of course," Mr. Peterson said smoothly. "This is more of a personal request. My client understands that this was your childhood home, and they are a great admirer of your late father's work. Out of respect for his memory, my client has authorized a gesture of goodwill. They would like to allow your mother, Mrs. Vance, to select one final item from the house, a piece of furniture, a painting to take with her to her new residence as a keepsake." I had to admire his performance. It was a perfect move. It seemed like an act of unexpected kindness, a generous gesture that would cost the new owner nothing but would put Jessica in an impossible position. To refuse would make her look monstrously cruel. Jessica was visibly annoyed, but she saw the logic. It was a small price to pay to finalize the deal smoothly. "Fine," she sighed, forcing a smile. "Of course. How thoughtful of your client." She turned and called to me, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mom, did you hear? The new owner is letting you pick one last thing to keep. Isn't that nice?" This was my cue. I walked slowly up the path, playing the part of the frail, grateful old woman. "That's very kind," I said, my voice soft. I stepped into the foyer of my home for what was supposed to be the last time. I looked around at the chaos, at the empty spaces on the walls where our life had once hung. "I know what I'd like," I said. I walked past the stacked boxes, through the dining room, and into Michael's old study. It was the one room that was still mostly intact. I walked to the wall behind his large oak desk, to the place where his most prized possession had always hung. It was a large framed map, an original 17th century cartographer's map of the world, a piece of breathtaking beauty and rarity. "I'd like this," I said, placing my hand on the frame. Jessica's face contorted. "The map? Mom, no, that's an antique. It's part of the house's assets. It's valuable." "I believe the offer was for any item," Mr. Peterson interjected calmly from the doorway. "But it's the most valuable thing in the whole house," Jessica protested, her greed finally overriding her performance of the gracious seller. Jessica was trapped. She looked from the map to the lawyer, her mind racing. Finally, she relented. "Fine," she spat. "Take it. Take the stupid map." "Thank you, dear," I said gently. I looked at Mr. Peterson. "I'll need some help getting it down." This was the moment, the revelation of the secret my husband and I had kept for over 40 years. As Mr. Peterson stepped forward to help me with the map, he accidentally jostled the large, heavy frame. It tilted on its hook, and with a soft click, a hidden mechanism was released. The map itself, the centuries-old parchment, swung forward on a hidden hinge, revealing what was behind it. A small, flush-mounted, state-of-the-art wall safe. Jessica stared at the safe, her jaw dropping. What is that?" she whispered. "That," I said, "is where your father kept his real treasures." I turned to the safe and, with steady fingers, I entered a sequence of numbers, the date of our wedding anniversary. The safe clicked open. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was not gold or jewels, but a series of worn, leather-bound journals and a single, thick, sealed envelope. "Your father was a meticulous man," I said, pulling out the envelope. "He documented everything, every business deal, every promise, every secret. It's all in these journals." I then held up the sealed envelope. On the front, in my husband's handwriting, were the words, "To be opened by my wife, Eleanor, in the event of my incapacitation or death, should my daughter, Jessica, ever act against her mother's best interests." The blood drained from Jessica's face. She looked at the envelope in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. "And now," I said, turning to Mr. Peterson, "I believe your client is ready to arrive." Mr. Peterson simply smiled. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "We're ready for you now," he said into the phone. "You can come in." He didn't hang up. He just held the phone, the line clearly still open. A moment later, his own phone, sitting on the nearby desk, began to ring. He reached over and pressed the speakerphone button. And from the small speaker, his own voice echoed back into the silent room. "We're ready for you now. You can come in." Jessica stared, her mind unable to process what was happening. Mr. Peterson ended the call and looked at her, his expression one of grim satisfaction. "As I said," he explained calmly, "my client is very eager to take possession." He then turned to me. "Welcome home, Eleanor. The house is yours." Jessica stared, her mind desperately trying to process the impossible scene before her. The lawyer, the phone call, the words, "Welcome home, Eleanor." It was a puzzle whose pieces did not fit into her reality. "What is this?" she finally sputtered, her voice a harsh, panicked squeak. She rounded on Mr. Peterson. "This is some kind of trick. I have a signed power of attorney. I have a sales contract. The sale is legal. The house is sold." She was brandishing the concept of legality like a weapon, the last defense of a cornered criminal. Mr. Peterson did not flinch. He looked at her with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice calm and clinical, "you have a piece of paper. You do not have a legal sale. You have, however, committed several felonies, including fraud and attempted theft against an elder." "That's absurd!" she shrieked. "She signed it. I have her signature." "Yes, you do," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her hysteria like a surgeon's scalpel. "You have my signature, and I have yours." I stepped forward and took the thick, sealed envelope that I had retrieved from the safe. I broke the seal that my husband had placed on it years ago. Inside was a single, folded document. It was not a letter. It was a legal agreement. Your father was a brilliant man, Jessica, I said. He was also a deeply cautious one. He saw the greed in you years ago. He worried about what you might do when he was gone, when you thought I was alone and vulnerable. I unfolded the document and placed it on the table. 5 years ago, after you borrowed and never repaid a substantial sum from your father's business accounts, he sat you down in this very room. He made you sign this agreement. Do you remember? I watched her face as she looked at the paper. It was an agreement stating that in exchange for her father not pressing criminal charges for embezzlement, she would forfeit any and all future claims to his primary estate, including this house, should she ever be found to be acting against my financial interests. Her signature was at the bottom, bold and clear. She stared at it, her face a mask of horrified recognition. This isn't binding, she stammered. It was years ago. He's dead. Dead men's wishes, when properly notarized, have a remarkable power in a court of law, Mr. Peterson said coolly. That document effectively nullified your inheritance claim to this property the moment you decided to sell it. But the signature, she insisted, her voice cracking. The power of attorney she signed in the hospital. Ah, yes, the signature, I said. You were so focused on the prize, my dear, that you never bothered to read the fine print. I turned to Mr. Peterson. The document Mrs. Vance signed in the hospital, the lawyer explained, was indeed a power of attorney. However, it was a springing power of attorney containing a very specific clause, Clause 17B, I believe. It only becomes legally effective upon a determination of incapacitation by 2 independent physicians, a determination which, as you know, was never made. Your mother was weak, but her mind was perfectly sound. He let that sink in. Therefore, the document you used to authorize the sale of this house was legally worthless. You did not have her legal consent, you acted fraudulently. The entire elaborate scheme, the weeks of manipulation, the final, cruel eviction, it all came crashing down around her. She had been so sure of my weakness, so blinded by her own greed, that she had walked directly into a trap that had been set for her years ago by her own father and sprung by the mother she had so foolishly underestimated. And as for the new owner, Mr. Peterson continued, gesturing around the room, the house was never truly on the market. The moment you listed it, I, acting on behalf of a private trust, put in an immediate all-cash offer. A trust, he added with a slight smile, that Mrs. Vance established a month ago for the sole purpose of buying back her own home. He looked at Jessica, his expression now one of grim finality. Actually, Miss Vance, he said, his voice dropping, the only person going anywhere is you. To a meeting with the district attorney. I have already sent his office a copy of this agreement, along with a detailed account of your fraudulent sale of this property. They are very interested in speaking with you. That was the end. The final, checkmate move. Jessica let out a sound that was half a sob, half a scream. She stumbled backwards, her face a ruin of shattered greed and abject terror. She looked at me, her eyes finally pleading. Mom, please, don't do this. I'm your daughter. I looked back at the stranger who wore my daughter's face. I thought of my husband, of his love and his foresight. I thought of the long, lonely nights in the hospital, the fear and the pain made 100 times worse by her cold, calculating presence. I thought of the red sold sign hammered into my lawn. My daughter, I said, my voice quiet and full of a sorrow that was deeper than any anger, would never have done what you did. I don't know who you are. I turned my back on her and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden Michael and I had planted together. The reckoning was over, Mr. Peterson calmly escorted a sobbing, hysterical Jessica out of the house, out of my life. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the house settling back around me. But it was not the empty silence of loss. It was a new silence, a silence of peace, of strength, of a home reclaimed. I had faced the greatest betrayal of my life, and I had survived. My husband had protected me one last time, and I had honored his memory by being the strong, intelligent woman he had always believed me to be. The battle was over, and I was, finally, home. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your own story in the comments. Your voice, believe me, always matters.